The streets of Los Angeles have become the latest battleground in a high-stakes political war between the White House and the state of California. President Donald Trump, citing a need for law and order, made the extraordinary decision to federalize the National Guard and deploy United States Marines to the city. Their mission, as stated by the administration, is to conduct widespread immigration raids. This move represents a dramatic escalation in federal power, bypassing state authority in a way that has alarmed legal scholars and civil rights advocates across the nation. The sight of armed troops on American streets, tasked with domestic law enforcement, has ignited a firestorm of controversy and pushed an already tense political climate to a boiling point. In a swift and forceful response, California Governor Gavin Newsom has positioned himself as the primary defender of his state's sovereignty and its residents. On Tuesday, June 10, 2025, his administration filed an emergency request in federal court seeking an immediate injunction to halt the Trump administration's actions. Newsom argues that the deployment is a flagrant abuse of presidential power and an unconstitutional overreach. He has framed this not just as a policy disagreement, but as a fundamental threat to the principles of American democracy, a direct challenge to the balance of power between the federal government and the states that has been a cornerstone of the republic for centuries. During a powerful public address, Governor Newsom painted a grim picture of the situation, warning that President Trump's actions were a step toward authoritarianism. He accused the president of using the military to go far beyond the pursuit of criminals, instead targeting entire communities. "Democracy is under assault before our eyes," Newsom declared, his words resonating with a national audience watching the events unfold. He stressed that while California might be the first state to face such a direct federal intervention, it would certainly not be the last if this precedent were allowed to stand, casting the legal fight as a defense of democratic norms for the entire country. President Trump, however, has vigorously defended his decision, portraying it as a necessary measure to restore order. On Thursday, June 12, 2025, he took to his social media platform to assert that Governor Newsom had totally lost control of the situation in Los Angeles. Trump claimed that without the decisive intervention of federal forces, the city would be a crime scene like we haven't seen in years. This rhetoric aligns with his long-standing law and order messaging, framing his actions as a rescue mission for a city he depicts as being on the brink of chaos. And he has suggested that Newsom should be thanking him for the intervention, rather than fighting it in court. At the heart of this escalating crisis is a stark disagreement over a phone call that took place on Friday, June 6, 2025, just days before the federal deployment began. Governor Newsom insists that President Trump gave him absolutely no warning that he was planning to send troops to Los Angeles for immigration enforcement. According to Newsom's account, the conversation was general in nature and did not touch upon such a drastic and unprecedented action. This version of events supports the governor's narrative that the deployment was a surprise maneuver, executed without proper consultation and in bad faith, further justifying his legal and public opposition to what he sees as a sneak attack. President Trump, predictably, offers a completely different story. He has publicly asserted that the phone call was specifically about the impending deployment and that Governor Newsom was fully aware of the plan. Trump's narrative paints Newsom not as a blindsided defender of state rights but as a politician who is now feigning outrage for political gain. This, he said, dispute over a single conversation has become a central point of contention, muddying the waters and allowing supporters on both sides to rally behind their leader's version of the truth, making reconciliation or de-escalation nearly impossible as the fundamental facts remain contested. This public feud is widely seen as politically advantageous for both men, allowing them to energize their respective bases. For Governor Newsom, who is often mentioned as a potential future presidential candidate, this conflict provides a national stage. He is able to cast himself as the leader of the Democratic resistance, standing up to a president his party views as a threat to democratic institutions. As conservative commentator Ben Shapiro has noted, these actions seem strategically aimed at a 2028 presidential run, cementing his credentials as a fighter. This high-profile battle allows him to move beyond state-level politics and command the national spotlight in a significant way. Simultaneously, the conflict serves President Trump's political agenda perfectly. It allows him to engage with a familiar and reliable political foil, the progressive state of California. By targeting a state that has consistently and overwhelmingly voted against him, he reinforces his image as a president willing to take on liberal strongholds. This narrative plays exceptionally well with his core supporters, who often view California as a symbol of everything they oppose. The fight with Newsom becomes another chapter in his ongoing culture war, a battle that he believes demonstrates his strength and commitment to his promises on immigration and crime, regardless of opposition. The current standoff marks a dramatic and abrupt departure from the tone of cautious cooperation that defined the relationship between Trump and Newsom earlier in 2025. This recent history makes the current animosity all the more striking. In January, for instance, the two leaders presented a united front when President Trump visited Los Angeles to survey the extensive damage caused by recent wildfires. Standing side by side, they publicly pledged to work together to ensure a swift recovery for the affected communities. This moment of bipartisan collaboration suggested that a more pragmatic and less combative working relationship might be possible between the two powerful political figures. This spirit of cooperation continued into the following month. In February 2025, Governor Newsom traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with the president and advocate for additional federal relief funds for wildfire recovery efforts. Following their meeting at the White House, Newsom described his discussion with Trump as collaborative and productive. This was part of a broader, carefully crafted strategy by Newsom to project a more moderate image. He was attempting to appeal to a wider electorate by demonstrating an ability to work across the aisle, even with a political adversary as polarizing as Donald Trump, for the benefit of his state's residents. Newsom's outreach to the political center was not limited to his interactions with the president. He launched a new podcast with the stated goal of understanding the successes of the MAGA movement, a move that surprised many within his own party. He also took a public stance against transgender athletes participating in female sports, a position that aligned him more with conservatives than with the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. These actions were widely interpreted as a deliberate effort to build a more centrist profile, potentially laying the groundwork for a future national campaign by showing he was not beholden to a single political ideology. However, that period of détente now seems like a distant memory. The president's decision to deploy federal troops to Los Angeles has shattered any semblance of a working partnership. The governor's recent strategy of moderation has been completely eclipsed by his new role as the chief antagonist to the White House. This abrupt shift highlights the volatile nature of American politics today, where deep-seated ideological divides can quickly override any temporary displays of bipartisan cooperation. The conflict over immigration has proven to be a line that neither leader was willing to cross, forcing them back into their familiar roles as political adversaries. The recent military deployment is not an isolated incident but rather the latest chapter in a long and contentious history between Donald Trump and the state of California. Even before his presidency, as a candidate in 2023, Trump frequently singled out the Golden State, calling it a symbol of our nation's decline. Throughout his time in office, this antagonism has only intensified. He has repeatedly threatened to withhold federal aid for wildfire relief, famously suggesting the state should rake its forests. He has also called for extreme measures like shooting store robbers, and has consistently warned about the dangers of illegal immigration, often using California as his prime example of failed policies. The Trump administration has consistently used its executive power to challenge California's progressive policies on multiple fronts. In April 2025, Governor Newsom's administration initiated a lawsuit against the federal government over a series of sweeping new tariffs that disproportionately affected California's economy. This legal battle over trade policy was just one of many. The administration has also directly targeted some of the state's most ambitious and expensive projects, signaling its clear intent to disrupt the state's agenda wherever possible, creating a constant state of conflict between Sacramento and Washington. This pattern of opposition has extended to infrastructure and environmental regulations, two areas where California has long sought to lead the nation. In early June 2025, the Trump administration announced its intention to cut federal funding for California's high-speed rail project, a signature initiative for the state. Furthermore, the president is expected to sign a measure today, on June 12, 2025, that would officially block California's long-standing authority to set its own strict vehicle emission standards. This move is a direct assault on the state's pioneering role in combating climate change and a major victory for automakers who have opposed the stricter rules. The ongoing conflict between the nation's most populous state and the federal government carries profound implications that extend far beyond California's borders. It raises fundamental questions about states' rights, the limits of presidential authority, and the future of federalism in a deeply polarized America. How this showdown over immigration raids, environmental rules, and federal funding is ultimately resolved could set critical precedents for the relationship between Washington and all other states. As the legal and political battles intensify, the nation watches, knowing that the outcome of the Trump versus Newsom feud will undoubtedly shape the country's political landscape for years to come.
I hope you found this video useful. Follow me right here on YouTube for more great content daily. Download my international best-selling book, Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone, for absolutely free at growfast.club. I say again, download my book at growfast.club for all of my 7-figure growth hacks. Get your copy now while it's still free.
There it is. Magnum. Holy moly.
Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
Dear God. It's beautiful.